Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Taoist. And my name is Kit Man, and first of all, I want to start by just thanking all you guys, everybody that's listening, everybody that has followed or subscribed or whatever. We've jumped in the last week, which is so cool to see, which means more people are being exposed to maybe some thoughts and some ways of doing things that maybe they hadn't considered before. And if you know somebody that might be interested in Taoist thought and Taoist lifestyle, how to process things a little bit differently, please forward this podcast to them and like and subscribe and do all that jazz that we're supposed to do when we like something. It's free, right? That's your best way to support the show. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. And it's super easy to do, and I sure do appreciate it. So today on this particular episode, by the way, we are going to have another Ask Me Anything sort of educational episode. We've got a bunch of good questions the last couple of weeks, so we will have another one coming up here very soon, maybe even the next episode. I haven't quite decided yet, but today I want to talk about something that gets processed differently. It's almost like how people process death differently. Everybody, every human being on the planet processes everything differently, but some of us are closer on certain things and farther away on others. And one of the things that people have the biggest trouble processing is change. And some people can't process small change, let alone big, giant life changes. And it does kind of feel sometimes like death, like grief, like loss. And that's something I want to talk about today, because here in our house, we are pondering, not settled 100% for sure, but pondering a fairly massive life change. I won't get into it right now because it's probably coming up a little sooner than we anticipated. So, but we are processing a massive life change, and that is moving to another country. We have always had it in the back of our head that we would move to Costa Rica and perhaps build a Taoist retreat, which we have in the plans, but nothing solid yet. But also we may just move there to move there. We really like it, and there are some other reasons why we are considering it, but we had originally thought that this would be something down the road, 4 or 5 years from now, but now we're kind of pondering maybe we would do it a little bit sooner. And that decision, even though it hasn't actually become a reality yet, that decision has caused some internal anxiety and some internal stress, not just with me, but with my wife, and probably even with others in the household. And so I wanted to talk today about change and how change is already in motion in your life. You may not realize it, but quietly things are rearranging the edges of your life while you're pretending that everything is the same. Things are always in flux, whether we believe that or not. All of it is constantly shifting. And yet when we make a decision for a big change, we resist. We cling to it. We say we don't know about the timing. It's too much all at once. And we talk about things like stability, and we talk about stability as if it's a solidifying virtue. But in truth, nothing stable ever grows. Right? There's a thing that's hard for people to understand and hard for people to realize. But Think about a city, like really city planners that do that for a living. They will tell you that a city does not stand still. It either grows or goes backwards. It's never the same a year from now as it is today. There's something that has either gone forward or backwards. And life is kind of like that. We may not realize it, but we're changing all the time. So Taoism doesn't treat change as an event. So when this came up, it's not the easiest thing to kind of process in a Taoist way, because Taoism doesn't even really recognize that change should be stressful, because change is always occurring in the Tao. It's not something that happens to you. It is the movement of life itself. The Tao Te Ching calls it the returning. It's an endless cycle of becoming and dissolving that keeps the world alive. But now big changes, moving to a new place, ending a relationship, starting over at a new job. These big changes expose how little control we actually have, and therefore we get scared. It's not just the unknown, it's the reflection of how fragile our sense of self really is. And what's harder still is realizing that our changes ripple outward. For every choice we make, every departure, every beginning, every ending, everything touches the lives of others that we don't even really think about. And because of that, those people have to change as well, because accepting change is in itself a part of change, right? We like to think of change as a big decision, something we choose to do, something we prepare for, we manage. But most of the time, that's not really true. We think we are preparing for it. We think we are managing it, but sometimes it's not really possible to negotiate certain things in the change, things we don't even ask for. You never know what's coming around the corner once you make that decision that you think you're making to change, right? The ground shifts, and suddenly all that talk about acceptance and new beginnings feels scary. We're super selective about what kind of change we resist as well. We welcome change when it flatters us, right? A big promotion, a raise at work, better views, new adventures, but we recoil when it asks us to let go of something familiar. For me, it's not the change that makes me apprehensive, it's the loss. The house that we live in right now, this is the longest I've ever lived in a single dwelling in my entire life. And it has become a womb for me. It's very comfortable. And the thought of packing it all up and leaving it behind, even though the things in front of it seem exciting and adventurous, and maybe even a little oddly dangerous, that all sounds great. But it's the loss of who we thought we were inside of a particular life that really causes that stress. When you move to a new place, the fear isn't about the actual boxes or the addresses. It's about leaving behind the version of you who belonged. You belong in a place. You go to places where they know your order. You see friends, the routine that you have throughout the day. Your mailbox is in the same place that it's always been, this walking route that held your time when you think. There's these little anchors that you don't realize in a day-to-day, but when you decide to give them up, they become heavier than you realize. Because when they're gone, the question isn't what's next, it is who do I become without what I have? without having what I have. And the Tao Te Ching reminds us that the soft overcomes the hard, right? Lao Tzu wasn't romanticizing fragility. He was pointing to a truth about adaptability. Rivers don't argue with rocks. They just moves around it. And over time, the stone gets reshaped. We talk about rivers all the time. That's a Taoist thing to do. We talk about the water. But it's important to realize, because that's how you view the Tao. That's how you view life, as the river. That's what the change does. It wears away the hard edges of who we pretended to be until what's left is closer to our real shape. But we live in a specific culture, right? This show's called The Modern Taoist for a reason, because we live in a specific kind of culture. And navigating that is part of what we're trying to accomplish here. And our culture is not built for softness. We glorify certainty, we glorify routine, and plans that stretch years ahead. We glorify planning. We sell stability as a reward for hard work. But in the natural world, that's not how it goes. Forests burn and then they regrow. Shorelines have a storm and they shift. Tides come in and out. Everything alive moves, including us. When we start moving, we call it comfort. Right? Change is hard because it exposes our addiction to control our environment. We like to believe that effort guarantees outcomes, good behavior gets rewarded. And when the rug gets pulled out from under you, it feels like a stress. But what it is a reminder that control is not real in the first place. Only participation is. You're not meant to hold on to the river with your hands. You're meant to swim in it. But then again, there's a human cost that we don't talk about enough. Because a change is going to rearrange the lives of not just us, but someone else. Pretend it's a relationship or a job. When you leave, someone else stays behind. When you grow, someone else might feel left behind. When you start over for yourself, it might look to them like betrayal. Even positive changes can create grief for those who aren't ready to go along with you. And if you're an empathetic human being, that weight can also be a reason to hesitate. Here's a paradox, though. Refusing to change doesn't actually protect anyone. It just delays everyone's evolution. Staying small so that others can stay comfortable, that's not compassion, that's fear. And the Tao moves through everybody, not just you. So when you step into a new current of the river, it gives other people permission to find that too, even if it feels painful for them at the time. Because again, the problem isn't the change itself, it's the stories that we have attached to it. When we say things are ending, that's not the truth. They're just transforming. We say we're starting over when we're just continuing from a different point on the circle. Remember, the Tao doesn't do straight lines. Nature does not construct in straight lines. It flows, it folds, it returns. And what feels like loss is often just the next shape of where you're going to belong next. Right? I've seen it again and again in friends and students and myself. You think you're being torn apart, but you're really being just rearranged. And every time you resist, you make the process longer and more painful. I'm not saying rip the Band-Aid off. I'm saying accept that the realignment is going to happen. Because acceptance isn't passive. It's realizing that change isn't an interruption in your path. It is your path. So the real question isn't how do I survive change? It is how do I meet with it? How do I stay steady enough to feel that fear, feel that grief, feel that disorientation without making those feelings, without mistaking those feelings for failure? Because underneath that stress, underneath that panic, something very sacred is happening in your life. Your life is updating itself to match who you will eventually be. And when you can understand that, which is not easy to understand, it's not easy to accept, but when you can, the storm isn't a punishment anymore, it's an invitation to dance in the rain. There's a strange idea right now that is, it's even for someone like me that tries every day to understand that, hey, that's just the way it is. We just have to flow with it right now. There's something that's going on in modern spirituality. It's this weird idea that acceptance means surrendering your will. That to live in the flow means you just sit there quietly while everything rearranges itself around you. But that is not Taoism. Taoism is not passive, it is responsive. Just because it moves without precision and doesn't force things doesn't mean it's freezing. Lao Tzu wrote, "The world is torn by those who let it be." He didn't mean withdrawal. He meant awareness, seeing what is actually happening, rather than reacting to what you wish was happening. That's the heart of it. That's the heart of Taoist practice, to act in harmony with what is instead of burning energy for what was. And change tests that more than anything else. When life shifts, we instinctively reach for control. We analyze. We over-plan. That's a big one. We run these mental rehearsals of every possible outcome. But what we're really trying to do is outthink impermanence. And I got news. Impermanence always wins. The moment we absorb the chaos, internalize it, personalize it, believe that it's targeting us specifically, that's when we lose clarity. I knew a woman one time, she told me that after her divorce, she spent months reading meaning into everything. Songs on the radio, the noises outside of her window at night, the timing of text messages that didn't come. She said she was trying to make sense of something that had already happened. But that's what we do. We turn events into verdicts. We decide that change is either a punishment or a reward, when it's simply just movement. There's a difference between understanding change and absorbing it into our being. Understanding says, this is happening. Absorbing says, this is happening to me. This is two little words, right? This is happening. This is happening to me. Bum, bum, bum. Those two little words. The first one, this is happening, keeps the channel open. The second one, to me, adds emotion. Not to say that emotions aren't real, the feelings aren't real, they are. But what did we talk about before? Feelings are the weather, not the climate. They pass through, and if you cling to them, you make it last longer. Real world Taoism isn't about smiling serenely while everything burns down around you. It's about meeting change without making it personal. The job loss isn't an attack. The breakup isn't some kind of karma. Relocation isn't exile. It's life doing what it does. Clearing space. Every transition removes what no longer fits your shape, even if it's your decision to do it, or even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. In Taoist thought, everything contains its opposite. What we call endings carry beginnings. What we label destruction carries renewal. Yin and yang aren't enemies, they're phases. So the discomfort that you feel during change isn't a signal that you're off the path, it's confirmation that you are in motion. The challenge is to understand this without trying to escape it. If you numb yourself or distract yourself or race to replace what's gone, you skip that transformation. The silence after a change is where Tao whispers new instructions to you, and you can't hear that if you're shouting for the old ones to come back. Sometimes moving with change looks deceptively simple, especially in the relocation process, right? You clean out the closet, you cancel your subscriptions, you box everything up. And those small acts are how we tell the universe, I'm paying attention. It doesn't have to be spiritual for it to count. You can realize that these little small acts are you accepting the process. The hardest part is that clarity rarely comes first, right? So you start packing the boxes and you're packing boxes full of sadness. Because you're viewing it as, I can't believe I have to do this. I'm going to miss these things. I sure did love looking at this every single day, and now it's in a box. It's loss. So our challenge becomes not to view that in those terms as a loss, right? The challenge is don't label things in the process as good or bad. Don't rush to fix what's dissolving. Just recognize it as movement. You're part of a system that never stops changing. We like to label big events as change, but you've been changing every single moment of your life since the day you were born. They have been little changes, microscopic changes, dynamic changes, big changes. But you're not the same person you were even 30 seconds ago. You're part of a system that never stops turning. And you don't have to absorb every single jolt. And maybe that's the real measure of wisdom. You see what I'm saying? Maybe the real measure of wisdom is not how still we can stay, but how gracefully we can move. But I don't want to put it in only those spiritual terms, because change never happens in isolation. Every time you shift, someone else's gravity shifts too. Your move, your breakup, your career leap, they all redraw the emotional map for people who were orbiting your old life. And it's not always in what we lose, but it's what we cause other people to lose. When you grow, as I said earlier, someone might feel abandonment. When you leave, someone has to stay. When you decide to be honest, someone else loses their illusion. Even if it's healthy, even if it's necessary, change can create friction. Look, your relationship with others is simply an agreement. It is a nonverbal contract. This is how we behave to each other. I am in your life. You are in my life. This is an agreement that we have. So change creates friction between those old agreements and new realities. The Tao Te Ching says the sage does not possess. Having done, he rests. It's not about detachment. It's about release. You do what aligns with truth, and then you let the rest of it find its balance. The problem is, most of us confuse responsibility with ownership. We think we can manage other people's experience of our growth. We soften our decisions. We delay our departures. We over-explain, over-apologize. We're trying to make that transformation palatable for them. And so you don't need to seek approval before you begin flowing. Doesn't mean you stop caring. You can love somebody deeply and still know that your next step will take you away from them. And you can wish them peace even as you pack your bags. That's a kind of courage that we rarely celebrate, but it's sacred. To walk your path without pretending it won't change theirs, you have to know that. Every major life change is like dropping a stone in water. The first ripple is your own life rearranging itself. The next few is everyone touched by that new pattern. And eventually those ripples go further and further out, right? But they do fade. The surface gets smooth again. But the water now has a new rock in it. So it is a new shape, a new reality. I remember somebody once telling me that when they moved to another state. But let me digress a minute. When I was in the radio business, I moved all the time. In fact, let me tell you my story instead of this other person's story. I moved all the time, and I moved away from my family when I was very young because of my career. And the first time I did it, my mother stopped speaking to me for like a year, which was fine because we didn't have that kind of relationship anyway. But she was doing it because she was hurt that I chose distance. But the truth was, I wasn't choosing distance. I was choosing direction. And that direction happened to lead me away. And over time, when I had to move a lot, that softened. She sort of understood. And she didn't know it. She wasn't a Taoist. She wasn't doing it on purpose. But what happened was that old pattern had to dissolve first. And that is the human cost of any big change, and that is the temporary disarray that other people feel. The people who you love and that love you have to reorient themselves. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they won't. But if the change came from alignment and not impulse, if you did it because it was part of your path and not you, we weren't forcing something, then that's still the Tao in motion. You don't betray yourself to keep the peace, right? Move in your own truth. The peace, if it's meant to, will catch up eventually. There's a quiet grace in allowing others to live in their discomfort. We don't have to rush to fix it. Growth always creates contrast. Someone will want that version of you that fit into their comfort zone. But staying in that shape to spare them pain only delays your inevitable. Because the Tao doesn't traffic in permanence, it's only in continuance. If you hold still too long, believe me, life will find another way to move you. And it may be far more painful than you making the decision to move yourself. Now, here's what's beautiful, though. When you change honestly, You become a permission slip for others. They see what's possible. That it is possible to let go and still be loving. That it's possible to evolve without apologizing. So much of the world's suffering right now comes from people unafraid to move, unafraid to change their mindset because their ego gets involved. Or they get stuck in jobs or relationships or towns. They stay because they don't want to hurt anybody, or they don't want to hurt themselves because they think by changing their mind on something, they're betraying their own ego. That's not peace. That's paralysis. So as you move through your next change, remember, you're not the only one crossing that bridge. Others are there, beside you, behind you, or waiting on the other side. People you've not met yet are going to be affected by what you're doing right now. So walk gently. Don't ignore that, but do keep walking. Because your movement doesn't destroy connection, it just transforms it. And that is the truth about the human cost of change. It's not cost, it's an exchange, it's a trade. One version for another. There's a moment after every shift when life goes strangely quiet. That noise that filled your day, the routines, the small tasks, the background chatter of certainty, that all fades. And for a little while, there's this kind of stillness that feels a little too wide, like emptiness. And you look around and you realize that the soundtrack of your old life has been muted. The people who knew your patterns aren't there. Even the air smells different. That's the part no one warns you about. It's that pause after change. Change rearranges things. And change rearranges sound before it rearranges sense. You'll notice it first in the mornings, the silence before you speak a new address out loud, the pause before you open your phone and remember that the person you used to text doesn't live in this version of your life anymore. The brain keeps sending signals to a world that's already gone. It's like a limb that still itches after it's been removed, and we mistake that for nostalgia. But it's just orientation. Your nervous system just hasn't caught up yet. You break up with somebody and suddenly they're not in your life anymore, but your nervous system still hasn't figured that out. You try to outrun that feeling by staying busy. So you pack schedules, you pick new goals, you invent stories about fresh starts. But if you do all that too quickly, you're not transitioning, you're just relocating confusion. The Tao moves slower than your fear. It waits for honesty. Honesty in this context doesn't mean confession. It means acknowledging what's actually here. That fatigue, that low-grade anxiety, the small bursts of relief when something unexpectedly works. Living inside change isn't a performance. It's a transition. It's a conversation, really, between who you were and who is going to arrive very soon. And you start to realize that every one of these ends contains small beginnings inside of it. Not the poetic yin-yang one, literally. The way your body relaxes when you stop pretending that old rhythm still works. The way food tastes different because you're finally tasting it without old trappings of distraction. A simple walk will feel like discovery again because nothing is mapped out. These are subtle miracles. People talk about finding themselves, but that's not what happens. You're not lost. You're being rewritten. The sentences of your life are simply changing tense. And if you can bear to read without skipping ahead, you start to see the grammar of the transition, how each unknown suddenly becomes known. Move to a new town, and your path to work within just a few weeks becomes comfortable. Where it had been so unknown and strange. And your old paths become less and less clear. Each loss makes room for perception that didn't exist before. And we can do all of our meditation and breath work, and those help. The hardest discipline here isn't that, though. It's not the meditation or the breath work. It's being patient. Don't demand resolution. You can't hurry clarity. When the Tao reshapes your life, it does it at the speed of reality, not the speed of comfort. And you're not going to see that full pattern until you've lived enough of it to view things in hindsight. We don't really notice things now. We notice what just happened. It's harder to live. That's why living in the exact perfect present is very, very difficult, because everything is framed by what just happened. So in big changes, that hindsight can take months, sometimes years. I had a friend who said the best thing that ever, believe it or not, I had to fire him from a radio job. And he said later the best thing that ever happened to him was being fired. But at the time, he was pissed. He was mad. And he was mad at me. And what he said is because he didn't know who he was without that title, without that routine. And it took him a long time to realize that he'd never know who he was and had never known who he was, really. Change has a way of stripping away these borrowed identities. If you stay present through that stripping down, something really, truly remarkable happens. Anxiety begins, although it's very difficult and you have to understand it's going to happen, right? But if you can stay present long enough, that anxiety begins to turn into curiosity. Instead of asking, why is this happening? You start asking, hey, well, what is this? What is this showing me? It's a subtle shift, but it changes the chemistry of your whole experience. Fear collapses your awareness into survival mode. Curiosity expands it back out into participation. It's not romantic, it's not poetic, it's not philosophy, it's science, it's biological. When you stop fighting uncertainty, your nervous system relaxes. Breath deepens, vision widens, you see more options. It's not magic, it's physiology aligning itself with your new reality. But this is also where humility enters. Change reminds you that you're not directing the orchestra, you are an instrument inside of it. You are a violinist, you are playing your part. Choices, actions, timing, but the melody is moving through you, not from you. That's why forcing outcomes feels so exhausting, because you're trying to conduct a symphony that is already written and is already in progress. None of this looks impressive from the outside. And when I say the outside, I mean the outside of our own selves. It looks like mornings that don't really do anything, or unfinished thoughts, awkward introductions to new people. It looks like uncertainty. which our culture has taught us to mistake for weakness. When you finally start to move again, you'll notice these subtle changes. The world seems quieter, but then you hear more. You stop expecting certainty from plans. You begin to navigate by feel rather than by forecast. Once a change has landed, there's no putting the pieces back to where they were. That's the first truth you've got to face. You can revisit the past, but you can't return to the past. Whatever map you were using no longer matches the terrain. You need to make that realization. The one where you see there's no going back. When you finally get to that point, most people mistake that for loss, but it is not loss. It is a reorientation. You've crossed a threshold. And even if that crossing wasn't your choice, somebody broke up with you, somebody made that decision for you, somebody fired you from a job. If that crossing wasn't your choice, you're still on new ground now, right? So that question isn't how do I get my old life back? It's how do I live in this one without being mad all the time, without hardening against it? That's where we get stuck, is in that waiting room between what was and what might be. We tell ourselves we're adjusting, but what we're really doing is just freaking holding our breath, hoping the universe reconsiders the decision. Can you please just make this not happen, please? We think if we stay still long enough, we'll wake up to find that everything reset. But it's not going to, and that's the mercy of it, because if life could reset, it would mean no growth for anyone ever. How do you move forward when the familiar is gone? You start small, smaller than you think. You get out of bed. You make something. You show up when you say you will. The Tao always begins with the immediate. When Lao Tzu said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet, he didn't mean to inspire adventure. He meant to remind us that the first step is the one you can take right this minute. The trick is to move without demanding certainty. Don't wait for clarity to appear like a green light. You'll be waiting forever. Clarity isn't a signal. It's the result of forward momentum. You understand as you move, not before you move. And that's why Taoism teaches that non-resistance is not paralysis. You're going to want to look back. That's natural. Memory pulls on us like gravity. But there's a difference between remembering and demanding re-entry. And when you can, you'll notice small signs of life returning. The first time you go a whole day without thinking about what you used to do. The first night you sleep all the way through. Those are little mile markers of healing, of clarity. So always remember, change and moving forward doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop negotiating what's already been decided. That job ended. That relationship is over. You moved to another country. It's not going to unhappen. And life doesn't need your permission to start again. It already has. You're just catching up. When you start to move again, you'll notice the world responds. Not every change brings relief. Some changes leave scars. Some people, change will take people that you can't replace. There's no Taoist shortcut around that. Grief is a real thing. It's supposed to be. It proves you were present. But one way to know you're moving forward is when the question, why did this happen, starts to lose meaning, when it doesn't matter anymore. And eventually, without forcing it, gratitude will sneak in. Not gratitude for the pain, but for the clarity. So how do you keep going through major life change? The same way you breathe. You don't think about your next breath, you just take it. Let the old air go. That old air kept you alive a few seconds ago, but you still let it go. You've got to trust that that next inhale will find you. So if you're standing in the middle of a big change right now, I hope you know you're not alone. Everyone's story looks different, but the current underneath is the same. Something ends, something begins. You try to make sense of it, you fail, you breathe, you keep going. That's the rhythm of life. And when I look back at my own changes, the moves, the endings, the unexpected beginnings, that pattern is clear now. Every single time in my life I thought that I was falling apart, I was just becoming more clear. The world was asking me to live without pretending, and it still does. So that's the work. Not chasing the next certainty, not demanding closure, but showing up as you are, cracked, curious, still breathing, and letting that next moment meet you there. Taoism isn't out there somewhere. It's right here, right now, moving through every single shift, asking you only one thing: float, participate. So take a walk. Take a walk this week. Don't think about where you're headed. Just notice what's still here. The sound of your feet, the wind changing direction, the world reminding you that nothing is finished. It's always in motion. Even right now, as we end this episode, we're not finished. We don't look back. We start planning the next one. So thank you so much for listening. And if this episode spoke to you in any way, please pass it, share it, follow us wherever you listen. Help someone else that's going through some change navigate their own turning point. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and I thank you for listening to The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at dawananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.